I grew up in a rural area surrounded by dense forest. My family's property bordered a stretch of woods that seemed to go on forever, and as kids, my siblings and I spent countless hours exploring. By the time I was a teenager, I knew those woods like the back of my hand, or at least, I thought I did. One autumn evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the trees, and the air was crisp. I took a familiar path that led to a small clearing about half a mile from our house. It was a spot I'd been to dozens of times before, but that night, something felt off. The forest was unusually quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I reached the clearing, I noticed something strange. In the center of the open space, there was a small structure made of branches and leaves. It looked like a makeshift shelter, hastily constructed. I walked closer to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. A tattered backpack lying on the ground next to the shelter. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Who would be camping out here? The nearest neighbor was miles away, and this wasn't exactly a popular hiking spot. I debated whether to investigate further, but before I could decide, I heard a noise behind me, the unmistakable sound of a twig snapping. I spun around, my heart pounding. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man. He was tall and thin, with unkempt hair and clothes that looked like they'd been through hell. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, he took a step toward me. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I turned and ran as fast as I could, the sound of his footsteps close behind. The path back to my house suddenly felt much longer than I remembered, and every shadow seemed to move. When I finally burst through the back door, I locked it behind me and called my dad. My dad grabbed his rifle and went out to check the woods, but by the time he got to the clearing, the man was gone. The shelter and the backpack were still there, but there was no sign of who had built it. We reported the incident to the local authorities, but they didn't seem too concerned. They chalked it up to a homeless person passing through. Over the next few weeks, I avoided the woods, but one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard something outside my window. It was a faint tapping sound, irregular but persistent. My bedroom faced the backyard, which bordered the forest. I got up and pulled back the curtain, half expecting to see a branch hitting the glass. Instead, I saw him. The man from the clearing was standing just beyond the tree line, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He was staring directly at my window. I screamed, and my dad came running. By the time we got outside, the man was gone, leaving no trace behind. We set up trail cameras around the property and even installed motion sensor lights, but he never appeared on any of them. The only evidence he'd ever been there was the lingering sense of unease that seemed to hang over our house. A few weeks later, I was walking to the mailbox at the end of our long driveway when I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the ground, right in the middle of the driveway, was the tattered backpack from the clearing. It was muddy and torn, as if it had been dragged through the forest. Inside, we found a few random items: a broken flashlight, a crumpled map, and a Polaroid photo. The photo showed a small, run-down cabin in the woods. None of us recognized it. We gave the backpack and its contents to the police, but once again, there wasn't much they could do. They said the cabin in the photo was probably long abandoned, and without any concrete evidence of a crime, they couldn't investigate further. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was trying to send a message, or worse, that he was planning something. For months after that, I barely slept. Every creak of the house and rustle of the wind made me jump. Eventually, I moved out for college, and my parents sold the house a few years later. I've never gone back, and I don't intend to. But the story didn't quite end there. About a year after we sold the house, my mom forwarded me an article from a local newspaper. A group of hikers had stumbled upon a remote cabin deep in the forest near our old property. It was run down and overgrown, just like the one in the Polaroid. But what made the discovery chilling was what they found inside. The hikers reported that the cabin seemed to have been lived in recently. There were empty food cans, a makeshift bed, and old, faded photos scattered across the floor. Among the photos was one of our house, my childhood home. The police were called to investigate, and while they didn't find the man, They did find evidence that he'd been stalking multiple families in the area. He'd left behind crude drawings of houses and notes that were disturbingly detailed, describing people's routines, appearances, and even what time they usually went to bed. One of the notes specifically mentioned the girl in the upstairs window, a description that unmistakably referred to me. To this day, I still wonder how long he'd been watching us and what his true intentions were. I'll never know if he chose to target our family, or if we were just one of many. But one thing is certain: those woods, which once felt like home, now haunt my memories as a place of fear and danger. And the thought of that man still out there somewhere keeps me looking over my shoulder even now.